All right, I'm really excited. We have today with us for our guest in Israel Unfiltered, we have Yirmiyahu Danzig. Yirmiyahu Danzig is a Jewish educator for Jewish Unpacked. So why don't you unpack what is a Jewish uneducator? Sorry for the pun.
So thank you for having me, first and foremost. A digital educator is an educator, first and foremost. I spent a lot of my time teaching in formal settings, whether it was, in high school classrooms and elementary schools as well in Israel. And a digital educator recognizes that in our current reality with social media, that the digital arena, social media, can and must be utilized to educate people. And so, whereas a lot of people are just uploading cool videos of their cats or how to make some food, people like me utilize YouTube and Instagram and TikTok to take complex ideas and to simplify them and to engage people with various forms of content, whether it's reels or carousels and all the different types of things you see while you're scrolling on your various social media. So I do that for Unpacked. I host for our YouTube videos, our short films, as well as our content on TikTok and Instagram.
All right, so I want to get more obviously into you, your knowledge, your experience. We're definitely going to talk about your Jewish diversity, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about what Jewish Impact Unpacked is. So kind of get a little vibe of what your kind of your day to day and what your focus is on there.
So, in order to understand Jewish Unpacked from my perspective, it's important to understand a little bit about my approach. I mean, anybody who's familiar with me, I'm that Semite on Instagram and on TikTok. And basically, my brand is on addressing anti Semitism, racism in various forms, and the complexity of Jewish identity in various parts of the world by embracing the nuance, seeing that, yeah, in order to understand the truth, you have to explain it through a diversity of perspectives. And sometimes that includes not saying the prettiest things. So I come from, a standard Jewish educational background where we learned the kind of cookie cutter definitions of Judaism and Jewishness, Israel, Israeli history, and Zionism. And as much of the Jewish world is waking up to today, this type of simplified Judaism, palatable Judaism and Jewishness and Zionism doesn't really cut it with young people, and particularly people from my generation, which is millennials and Gen Z, where we realize that if something sounds too pretty, it's probably too good to be true.
How old are
Um,
you?
I'm 27.
Okay, cool. Okay.
And so my approach from the jump, when I jumped on to the physical space of advocacy and education, whether it was on college campuses in the States or also in grassroots activism here in Israel, was to embrace the full complexity of the matter. To say, okay, yeah, Jewish identity is complicated. Israeli history and Israeli culture is complicated. Let's break it down. Let's see why it is that these things are being demonized by our enemies, and what's the truth of that they're picking on, and what's the full picture of the matter. So basically, what I do in my content is break down the full complexity to the best of my ability. When I
Okay.
came across Jewish Unpacked, I saw that this was something that they fully embodied in their approach. And this is why they came to me. They brought me onto their team. They said, we want you to do this for us across our platforms. And Jewish Unpacked takes formal educational resources to elementary schools, high schools, Jewish clubs across the English speaking world. And they also take that educational formal approach to informal education in the digital sphere through short films on YouTube, and now increasingly with me on TikTok and Instagram.
Fascinating. Okay, so you said it's two things that within the same sentence. It was interesting. You said anti-Semitism and racism, and particularly, I would say in the West, is that I find that a lot of, let's say, when people talk about racism and inclusion, and that they seem to leave out Jews. I'll give you a stereotype, something that I've noticed. If you look all at the animated stock images, so let's say I do from a lot of, like, let's say LinkedIn's newsletter, which I'm a LinkedIn marketer, so we get a lot of that. They'll have every visible race, every religion, people in wheelchairs, anything you can imagine, and turbas and hijabs and and everything. But you can be technically, and this is later we'll get into the nuance, which is far more fun. They don't include Jews in both religion. Let's say an observant Jew male or female. It's both. You get both visibly dressed Jewish, so to speak, in a cookie cutter way, right? They're all cookie cutters in these things. Why don't, when those that preach anti-racism, how come they seem to neglect, almost it feels like intentionally, Jews?
Well, my first gut response is to say that Jews are too complicated for them, right? Everybody else in the English speaking Western context fits within this very clear binary of black and white, right? So the Western world has been enamored with this kind of racialization of human identity for the past couple centuries. And the response to that, which has been anti-racism, has just basically continued along that legacy of dividing people along this kind of color-coded racial identity lines. And Jewish people in general, certainly in the Western context, have always challenged the standard definitions of identity, right? We're not just a people, right? We're not just a religion. We're not just a nation. We're all of these things together. And in the Western context, where we're seeing anti-racism manifest itself most strongly, being it in the UK, Canada, the US, the existence of Jews, whether they're visibly Jewish or not, has always been kind of challenging, right? Because here we have a people that are saying that they're a religion, or at least that they have a religion, but also that they're a unique ethnic group. But sometimes that ethnic group might look or be able to pass with the dominant group. Sometimes it might look like just white people. And as a result of that, it's kind of like, okay, on the one hand, there's this, let's say, altruistic, like, okay, it's the Jews are too complicated. We don't want to mess with them. We'll just leave them out because they deserve their own kind of treatment when it comes to their unique challenges of marginalization that they face. But then there's the more insidious that says, no, we don't accept the complex identity of Jews. And because they want to try and say that they're, even though they might pass or appear as white, they're not white. We're not going to accept that identity because they're going to say that this is basically Jews benefiting from white privilege, but then at the same time as they're doing that, trying to claim that they're oppressed by white supremacy. And so that insidious rejection of Jewish identity and Jewish experience motivates a lot of what we're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism on the far left, that refuses to accept Jews and to listen to Jews and see what it is that about Jewish identity that makes it both at the same time a target for white supremacy, but also appear as oppressive to groups of color that are facing marginalization in Western contexts like the United States.
Do you think that's largely fabricated by the anti-Semites on the left?
Which part?
I mean, my opinion is that there's a strong exaggeration, and they're trying to assign because I think it gives them victim and social currency in order to kind of say, hey, look, I'm calling out a bigot, in a sense. I'm not sure if I was coherent enough. Did you follow me?
You kind of cut out for a second. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, sure, no problem. That I think there's some kind of social currency in, and unfortunately, see this a lot online, and you would know this. People love jumping on the train. This person, cancel this person. This person's a racist. This person anti-Semite. This person this person that, and they feel like, oh, okay, I did some good virtue. I did something great today by doing that. And I think that people feel very good and very comfortable knowing that Jews seem to regularly, let's say, take it on the chin, and not fight back and not be violent. Kind of, like, we don't care. In a sense, we have more interesting things to talk about, that they continue to go after Jews, and it kind of raises that those individuals and those groups that go after Jews to make them feel like that they have a purpose or a meaning. You can think of Amnesty International as an example. They're overwhelming, right? Radical left-wing group, extremely anti-Semitic group, extremely obsessed with Jews, trying to make themselves seem virtuous by regularly putting Jews down, including when it comes to points that are straight up fabrications and lies that can easily be fact-checked. But people buy them, and they feel like they've elevated themselves by putting Jews down. Do you think that plays a part of it?
No doubt. I think it plays more of a dominant role when we're speaking about white anti-racists. Like, for example, these kind of international groups that are coming out of Europe, or the more elite liberal circles of white society.
The New York Times, Manhattan,
unfortunately there's a long list, and there's no doubt that Jews are always a convenient scapegoat, and a lot of this is ultimately, there's no doubt that there are Jews that benefit from appearing as white or occupying this kind of middleman position in the Western world. But in addition to that, it's also true that Jewish communities are victims disproportionately of racial violence, anti-Semitic violence, we call it, right? But which is a form of racial violence.
No, I agree with you. We need to stop calling it anti-Semitism, just call it racism.
Yeah, it's a form of racism, and
100%. It's
Yeah.
people don't relate to it. Unfortunately, you have one thing Jews are absolutely terrible at is language, being able to control the language and the conversation, and we're using these obscure words. And if you want to be taken seriously, you need to start using the language that people respond to the most.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these organizations and even individual activists that are involved in anti-racism work, it's a lot easier to pin the collective sins of the Western world and its history of racism and anti-blackness and homophobia. The list goes on the Jewish people, as opposed to saying, "Hey, our society has a problem." Right? They're very famous scholar of Africana studies, Henry Louis Gates Jr. You might be familiar with him. He had his Finding Your Roots show. He did a lot of work with Oprah. He famously said that under the floorboards of Western civilization, there are two currents. There's anti-Semitism and there's anti-blackness, and they're both underpinned by basically these economic principles. And it's a lot easier to not address that, to not speak about the real biases and their roots in the church's anti-Semitism and anti-Black racism. And it's much easier to just say, hey, there's this Jewish group that is really the reason why we've been so racist and the reason why we've marginalized all these groups. And so if we just get the Jews to behave better, whether as individuals or communities and minorities in our countries or as their own nation state, then society will be basically absolved of all of its sins and can move forward. And that really underpins a lot of the different forms of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, which is just a form of anti-Semitism.
Right. Okay. So you said something that was interesting. I want you to unpack. Sorry for overusing that word, but it's too fun. You were talking about anti-Semitism. You said in the West. Would you differentiate anti-Semitism between that of, let's say, America or North America and Western Europe? Did you see a difference between them, or are they two pieces of the same pot?
I would say they're almost two pieces of the same pot. There's obviously differences between American anti-Semitism versus Western European anti-Semitism. For example, within the United States, because the Jewish population is a lot larger than in the UK and a lot of these other Western European countries, it manifests differently amongst different populations. So anti-Semitism from white America looks a little bit different than anti-Semitism from Black America versus Latino America. There's some layers to it. But I think generally speaking, I would say that there's Western anti-Semitism and there's Islamic anti-Semitism. And those are two, perhaps the most dominant forms of anti-Semitism, the dominant discourse.
I would break it into the West into two kinds of anti-Semitism. I agree with you. Islam is its own pillar of anti-Semitism. I would do it as I think there's leftism, and then I was in general, it's usually socialist, communist. The Jews are the problem, why we don't succeed, and da 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 da. And then I would say there's like white supremacy, which comes from the right, even though they're strangely socialist. Not really, because Nazis are national socialists, right? But let's say so white nationals that think Jews are the root of all their problem. I would divide it in, let's say, if you were to separate the left and the right, so I wouldn't just say, let's say, the West and Islam. I think the two kinds of anti-Semitism in the West are very different. I think the anti-Semitism of neo-Nazis and, well, let's say, white supremacists are no longer a part of the mainstream. They obviously get a ridiculous disproportionate amount of media coverage where they get together once, twice a year with publicly to do some obnoxious demonstration, under 50 people each time in America with 320 million. And then there's the not marching in the street, but open talking of, let's say, anti-Semitism of mostly people mostly white elites. And I would say people on the left, right? Hard left specifically, actually. I wouldn't say the left. I don't think that's fair to liberals. The hard left that are anti-Semitic. You see those as, would you group those together? The two kinds of anti-Semites in the West in the way that I defined it?
I would, because I think that they're kind of almost reflections of each other, and they borrow heavily from each other. We can see, for example, just the horrifying videos that were circulated in the Jewish community of the Goyim Defense League, verbally attacking and verbally assaulting Jews in the streets of Orlando. All of a sudden talking about Israelis being responsible for massacres of Palestinians here in the Middle East. So these things are not, unfortunately, they don't remain within their own spheres. They borrow heavily from each other.
I agree they borrow from each other, but I would say that they have two cores of influence too. I would say also they borrow from, that would be borrowing from Islam also, not just the left with these lies. And I would say Islam also, when they can, they will borrow from the white supremacists, and they'll downplay, they'll downplay Nazism and deny, the Jerusalem Mufti met with Hitler in Jerusalem for the final solution to kill the Jews in the land of Israel. I mean, so they all borrow from each other. I would still separate those two pillars, even though, yes, they do borrow from each other.
Yeah, I would agree that ultimately they all borrow from each other, right? Within
Right.
Islamic or Islamist anti-Semitism, you have kind of more specific pan-Arabist anti-Semitism versus the Islamist, more Salafist, religiously motivated anti-Semitism, and they borrow from each other, and then both of them come together within this larger pillar.
Oh, they come together. Wow, do they come together?
Big time.
And we should talk about, actually, you just reminded me of the Hungarian elections. So I don't know how much you're following. So Orban is a Zionist, loves the Jewish people, Christian but not religious culturally, and he was just reelected pretty largely as prime minister or president. Opposing him was the left. He was right leaning, and the Nazis. They joined together in one party to run against him. The entire Western media, let's say the New York Times, all of them, and they're overwhelmingly anti-Semitic, the media, in my opinion. I mean, I can say by fact, I could show it the facts. They played him as an anti-Semite, which he isn't, and totally dismissed and ignored and buried any mention that the fact that actual Nazis were running against him along with the left, that they have nothing else in common other than that they wanted Orban out and they needed each other. And literally, if he lost, Nazis would have been in the government. And the media didn't cover it and did everything it can to bring down Orban. Why do you think that is?
Well, first, I want to say that I'm not an expert in Hungarian politics, and I haven't been following it closely for a while. But what I can say is that two things can be true at the same time. The left, the far left in Hungary, and the Nazis in Hungary can team up because they want to get Orban out. And Orban may be a fan of Israel and might have some good relations with Jewish people, but he could also be engaged in very dangerous far-right rhetoric. And
you're going to have to give some examples.
Yeah,
he's a nationalist, 100%. I mean, that's not a secret. He'll say that.
Right. I mean,
there's between nationalism and saying that he was far right. Their party's
right. So I'm saying, I don't have the specific examples because I haven't been studying Orban recently, but I do recall
But it was not about Orban. My interest is the fact that you literally have Nazis. I'm not going to call to the right of him. That's what they call it in Europe, right? If you're more nationalist or globalist, that's the left-right spectrum. It's different in every country, but I have strong correlations. Is that the people to the right of him, the neo-Nazis, and he had another party to the right of him, but they were allied, I think, with him in the government. They teamed up with the left in order to take him out, and the whole media was totally silent, calling Orban anti-Semite, which he obviously isn't, and the people trying to outright him are straight up wear Nazi armbands and have Nazi rallies in Hungary, hailing Hitler, and the media won't cover it because they would rather get rid of him, in my opinion, because they just want to bring in socialism, and that they don't care about, and Jews are in the way of that.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the specific situation to comment.
We can move on. It was just fascinating. It was probably because what you said just was so fascinating. We talk about how they mirror each other, and these people have nothing in common, right? Like the Green Party and the Nazis literally teaming up together.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be the first example of it, right?
No, it wouldn't. Well, what example?
There have been cases of white supremacists trying to join Hamas and commit acts of terror alongside radical Islamists, and the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan complimenting Farrakhan and other anti-Semites that are on the left of them.
Right, and you got Kanye to try to figure that out.
Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect trifecta of all different types of anti-Semitism in one human being.
Yeah, so that was something, bud. That's a case study for another time. Lovely. Okay, so you see, so whatever. You can say it's 2 pillars or 3 pillars, right? There's Islam, and you would say the West, which we can then further divide into, let's say, white supremacist nationalists, and then the so-called left, which has a lot of power. And I would say the white nationalists do not. What do you think are the threats to anti-Semitism, let's say, in the next next generation, or not even next 10 years?
So first, I would like to say that I do not underestimate the power of white supremacy to make a comeback with the next generation,
Especially recently,
especially
unfortunately.
recently. And I think that
If you said that 5 years ago, I would say you're
right.
being a little hyperbolic. And
Look, I
honestly,
mean,
like,
I remember when I was growing up.
I still don't think it's going to happen, but I would totally bet against it. But
Yeah,
again, it now wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
so I spent most of my childhood in California, and I remember, the era that I was in elementary school and then in high school was often described as post racial America, right, or post racism America.
Right.
And so so many different, particularly in the Jewish community, a lot of declarations that the end of white supremacy and the end of neo-Nazism specifically, because that was a serious problem, particularly in the 80s and the 90s. But I remember in the streets, like, seeing tons of skinheads, tons of kids being recruited.
Did you really? Did you really actually see? Because I'm from Philly, right? So it's totally different. I don't know where exactly Cali if you're from, but I have never, ever personally met. I mean, online's different, but I have never personally met a white nationalist.
I personally met a lot.
Money at me, anti-Semites call me kike on the way walking to shul and things like that. I've had that. But I have never seen, but that was driving by, throwing by. I have never seen a skinhead, to use your words, or white supremacist or nationalist personally. I'm also 10 years older than you. I'm 37. I think I grew up in a better time in America.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, there was definitely a period when it was like a lot less popular, but I think in the early 2000s, they started to kind of have a little bit of a resurgence.
Where in Cali were you?
Southern California. And Southern California is like a hub, particularly in the Poway, San Diego area.
Poway's outside San Diego, right? Yeah, I was there.
Exactly.
I was
San Diego
there a few years ago. Place is gorgeous.
Oh, it's beautiful.
San Diego,
and it's absolutely beautiful. And unfortunately, a lot of Nazis take advantage of the good weather to recruit.
Everyone does.
Men. so I mean, I saw it with my own eyes growing up, and I thought, maybe it's just here, but I had a feeling that this was there was like an undercurrent, something that was happening, and it wasn't being picked up by the mainstream Jewish community, not by the media, just ignored, and that it could make a resurgence. And I think that what we're seeing right now is a bit of a resurgence, but my main fear is that, things become pathological for Jews in a society, right? Whatever the society is, when the different forms of anti-Semitism meet and they conglomerate in a few key charismatic individuals. And I think that the reason why I was so alarmed by the Kanye phenomenon and the other types of things that were happening around it, because I don't want to just hyper focus on him, is that it was the potential for the different forms of anti-Semitism on the far left, on the far right, white nationalism, Islamism, communism, Marxism, etc., to combine within one person or a specific group. And when that happens, then it can become something very dangerous. And my concern is that it will, take some of the key components of those various mutations of anti-Semitism and create something which would be like an inquisition for Jews. And the Jews will have to, instead of denouncing like we had to do in the past, our religious identity, that today it's more of the requirement to denounce your national association with the Jewish people, i.e. Zionism.
Right. Why? What's people's obsession with getting Jews to denounce that? I think it's kind of a way to kind of like get Jews to turn against Jews. Honestly, it sounds kind of Nazi-ish in a way. You know what I mean? Like or communist actually, right? That you have to denounce everything. They would turn their kids against their parents and to turn them into the government or to the Soviet Union or Mao in China or right now in North Korea. It sounds very communist in the sense is that you have to denounce or you're going to go to the social or digital gulag, right? I'm feeling like, would you say, which doesn't surprise, which makes sense because it comes from the hard left, right? Which is communism. Is there a way out of this, or do you think like I try to wonder like yes, education, yes, okay, so you're doing a great work there. I'm trying to do things in my unique way, right? Very different. And I was kind of trying to do things, trying to have these conversations, but at the end of the day, I feel like, are we going up again? I'm not saying it's not worth not trying. But like, are we going up against something that we can't win? That is just kind of like, like it's you're trying to like push back against a wall. It's like you can't knock over a wall with your hands, kind of thing. I'm just wondering, like, would our energy better be spent on, let's say, Jewish unity and understanding the diversity of the Jewish people within? And I'm just wondering, like, and is the whole anti-Semitic thing, like you're saying, despite anything we do, you think that there may very well be a strong increase in white supremacy, let's say, in the next decade?
So I'll start with the last question you asked, and that's that my firm belief is that the best way to prepare Jews to confront anti-Semitism or any threat that we face is to make strong Jews. So the more that the Jewish people understand the complexity of our identity and know how to communicate it amongst ourselves, then we're going to know how to communicate it to others, and then we're going to be more prepared to respond to the threats that do face us, whether they're ideological threats, to come up with better ideas to beat bad ideas, or whether it's on the physical level in terms of actually training Jews to be able to respond to the physical threats of anti-Semitism. Look, I think that we're in a unique position right now because of the existence of the State of Israel, the revival of Jewish life, of Hebrew language and culture, the return of Jews from all over the world to give unique perspectives and come up with unique solutions to challenges. And I think that's also one of the reasons why anti-Semites are so pathologically obsessed with the Jewish state, because anti-Semitism inherently is a discomfort and a fear of Jewish power. Not Jewish power in the tropey anti-Semitic sense, but like legit, the Jewish power to decide what it is that we are going to do, to define our future, right? And the fact that the State of Israel gives us that in a way which we've never had in the past, or at least haven't had for 2,000 years, that is the reason why there's this animus against Zionism, against the Jewish state.
So if I'm going to put words in your mouth, tell me if I did it right. People want to control the Jews, and they don't want Jews to control their own destiny. Would you say that's true?
Yes, absolutely.
And Israel is just another reflection of Jews, all the more so want to control their own destiny. You said something interesting. You said something that made me think of something recently. I've been thinking a lot about just with the political debate recently here in Israel. I feel that you talked about, in order to fight anti-Semitism is particular, it's probably the best thing we can do. And by the way, I totally agree with this, is that make strong Jews, strong in Jewish identity, strong in Jewish education, strong in Jewish knowledge, strong in everything, and understanding, right, Jewish history, Jewish texts, etc. I think our greatest challenge is, as I kind of touched on earlier, is that the infighting between Jews, which is historical. I mean, I wonder if there are groups that are less unified in a sense than Jewish people. Everyone knows the Jews, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But I think that we may have a problem in Israel that we're trying to shed the Judaism that you saying that we so need to fight anti-Semitism and replace it with Israelism. Not that I'm opposed to it by any means, obviously, but the shedding of the Judaism part is that in exchange. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So I agree with the first part, in that our biggest threat to Jewish sovereignty and Jewish freedom has always been infighting, has always been division within. Our greatest strength is, and what's so unique about the Jewish people, is our diversity, not just in like physical appearance, but also in particular in our experiences and our ideas. That diversity enriches
real diversity.
Real diversity, right? Because look, I mean, physical diversity is also important, but also only in so much as that it is in a position from which you can then come up with good ideas, right? And it enriches, the physical enriches the metaphysical. But I would disagree in the sense that I'm concerned about Israeliness, consuming or taking the place of Judaism, because I think that what is
at the expense, I just want to be very clear. I mean, at the expense of, I'm a very proud Israeli, but it's, ditch your Judaism and just call yourself Israeli, so to speak. And I fear that feeds into the anti-Semitism that those that want to destroy us and the Judeophobes want, because we're no longer controlling our identity. Now we're just another country in a sense. Go on.
Yeah, I would say that first and foremost, it's important that whenever you're evolving as an individual or as a collective, to respect the place that you come from. That being said, you can look at things that you've done in the past, whether it was a habit or a belief, and you can say, you know what, that belongs to the past. Let me adapt. Let me evolve. But as long as it's rooted to who you are inherently. So right now, I think we're having a discussion about what that means, because there are aspects of the Israeli society, of Jewish Israeli society, that are really just trying to, throw us back to, thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, depending on the sector, and others that are just trying to radically change everything without a connection to the roots. And I think that what we need is something, this middle passage, right? This middle path that the Rambam, the Maimonides described, in which we look at where we came from, we appreciate our roots, but also we understand that Judaism of the future is not going to be the Judaism of yesterday. It's not even going to be the Judaism of today. And Israeli Judaism, this Israeliness, it's here because we need it as a people. And we need to appreciate what it is that it brings to the table, and to be open and flexible to what it's going to bring. It's going to be new, and it's, for some of us, unrecognizable.
Right. What do you mean by some of us unrecognizable? You're saying if you look 50 years in the future, how we may define how the way Judaism is organized and defined may be significantly different than today?
I would say so. And look, and this isn't just
Can you give me a hypothetical example or two so people can understand where you're thinking?
Yeah. So I would say we have to understand that the transition in terms of the perspective on what it means to be Jewish from before the Holocaust and today has already gone through radical changes because of the existence of the state of Israel. Whereas in the past, it was just assumed that the primary focus of Jewish life had to be religious, because it was just the realm of Jewish law that we were able to practice. Now that the Jewish people exist in their homeland, all of a sudden the attention is being shifted more from the religious to, say, the national. What does the Jewish people do as a collective? And that's something that a lot of people are uncomfortable with, specifically the Haredi sector, the ultra-Orthodox sector. It's also something that a lot of the people on the other side of the spectrum of the Jewish world, the Reform movement, feel very uncomfortable with. They're both kind of glued into the religious mode of Jewishness. Whereas if you ask the average Israeli what their Judaism looks like, it mostly has to do with the aspects of Judaism that most connect them to the collective, to the national existence of the Jewish people. It's the holidays, not just because the holidays are fun.
I like that definition. I thought that was a pretty good definition.
Yeah, and I think that this is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's definitely some work that's been done by Israeli scholars. Camille Fuchs is one of them, on what they call Israeli Judaism. And it gives us a little bit of a peek into the future, because this Israeli Judaism is going to be the future, just for the fact that the demographic future of the Jewish people is in Israel. By 2050 or 2065, it's something like 80 to 85% of the Jews in the world are going to be in Israel, just because of the birth rates.
I think as anti-Semitism, I think you can expect it to be greater. I think it pains me to say, I think the direction America is going is that we might unfortunately see a spike of Aliyah, like we did of, let's say, the beginning of the war in Ukraine, of Russians moving here.
I agree. And I just want to say that, that I think that's a great tragedy, because I think that even though Israeli Judaism is the future, it's just by virtue of the demographic trends, American Judaism has created some beautiful things, right? There are unique contributions of Reform Judaism and Haredi Judaism, and these groups are going to continue to exist. They're not going to disappear off the face of the earth. And so what we need to start engaging in right now, in order for this transition to be healthy for all Jews, for all Jewish communities, we need to start having dialogue. Reform Jews need to.
Well, I totally agree. So I speak to people of all political persuasions. Basically, everyone that disagrees with me, because I don't seem to agree with anyone, is that no one's talking to anyone, and it really scary. I'll read Ynet, and just the way they talk about settlers or Haredim, and then there's people, clients, friends that are very secular, very left, and I'm seeing what they're writing on Twitter. So I was like, obviously they're copy pasting; they have no idea they're being programmed. But it's like, I was like, guys, this is like, have you ever met a Haredi? Just go a kilometer to Bnei Brak. Have you had a conversation, or you literally just trusting the media that wants to divide us? You know what I mean? By the way, and vice versa. I'm not, just to be clear. I feel that this is our biggest threat. It's not white nationalist supremacists. It's not even, the anti-Semitic, white elite liberal media in the West, and it's definitely not Islam, in my opinion. To it's a problem, but I don't think that's existential. I think it's achdut. I think it's fraternity, really, between the Jewish people. What can be done to get people to talk to people that are different from them and actually find out they're all very much the same?
Well, I think that ironically, we can see that a lot of Jewish thought leaders are a lot more willing to have, a dialogue with people outside the Jewish community than they are within the Jewish community, because
Yes.
we have
What the
lots of
hell? What
allies.
the hell's up with that? Talk
Yeah.
about that, because
Look,
this bothers the crap out of me. There's more comfort. Even people would rather speak to an anti-Semite than they would with other Jews.
yeah. Like, for
It's
example,
almost like there's
a
a
lot of
comfort to
my
it. I know my place amongst an anti-Semite. I don't know my place amongst a Jew who has, who might be different religiously or has different priorities than me. It's weird.
Yeah,
What's up
like
with that?
for example, like I know from my work, I have a lot of experience doing, intercommunal work with Palestinians, with Muslims of all stripes, and there's a lot of commonality there, right? There's a lot of, a rich history of relationship between the Islamic world and the Jewish world, and I know there's other people that are engaged with that in the Christian world and with progressive spaces. I do a lot of, dialogue with progressive spaces. I identify more as a progressive than say a conservative. Um, but at the same time, I'm always shocked that when I talk to my fellow activists in progressive spaces or in faith dialogue with the Muslim world, they're not willing to speak with quote unquote settlers. They're not willing to speak with Haredim.
Right.
Or on the
Right.
other side of
Right.
the
But
spectrum,
by
they're
the way,
not
this is the same thing I was saying with the same inclusion. They won't put pictures of Jews. It's not a nuanced thing. I think I think it's straight up. I think there's a greater hate there. I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I think that they see Israel, in a sense, a strong national identity is a pillar of Western civilization. And for some reason, these snobby elites have some resentment for the West. That I
look, and
don't
I'm
think is healthy. There's a reason to be unhappy and things like that, and there's plenty of room for criticism. But I think the resentment for the West, these people are, upper middle class, and they live in like all white neighborhoods. And I don't think they're lecturing other people. That's my favorite. They'll go, is they live in their bubbles in Herzliya or in Tel Aviv or Mat Aviv. And I think within these bubbles in particular, that they talk about it and they'll go to a safe space for them to go feel good about multicultural dialogue, but they won't work with them. They won't bring them as a contractor into their home. You know what I mean? And there's this double standard there. What's stopping the Tel Avivnik from going literally 30-minute drive to go see a settler in the Shomron, or a 2-minute drive to see Haredim in Bnei Brak? What's stopping them? Because I can say, at the very least, I know for settlers, they'd gladly welcome them if they're curious and wanted to know. So would Haredim. But I know settlers especially, because there's a little bit more of a political angle to it in a sense. And it's tragic. And I think actually what happening is that the media is making it political. And so it's political we've othered, and they think that I mean, all groups looking at all other groups, is that they have an agenda that's different from mine. And people are like, I don't want my kids to be around that. I'm worried they might become Haredi, or I'm worried they become religious, might become right wing, or they might become left wing, or they might become secular, whatever it is. And there's fear that they're like, well, I'm not worried about my kid becoming Islamic, so I can go do all the cultural things that I don't see that as actually, I see that outside of the home when I'm going to that, to the community center where the multicultural event is. But I don't let that in my home or my neighborhood. So I feel comfortable going there. Right. And since that is my neighborhood, but what's more likely to enter my home or my neighborhood is people like me, is other Jews that have a different political opinion, religious vibe, or whatever it is. And so therefore they want to keep them further away because they actually see them as a threat more, as opposed to, let's say, someone that's so far away that, let's say, they're not worried about potentially them changing their mind, them being challenged intellectually or spiritually, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'm following, but I would think, if I'm understanding you correctly, that I would push back on the idea that it's because they're resentful towards the West. I would say that, the fact that the Haredi world and the Jewish communities of Judea and Samaria are a challenge to their own Western principles in many ways that they feel so uncomfortable with them. Whereas when they speak with groups that are very firmly outside of Western civilization, their assumption is that they're doing it from a place of power. That at the end of the day, you know, a lot of the wrestling over power right now that we're seeing within Israeli society is about a insecurity about the future. Is Israel going to be more of a Western style state? Is it going to be more liberal, or is it going to be more traditional and Middle Eastern?
It's funny because I don't want to go into this topic. I want to talk to you about your unique experience, but at least about the judicial reform. I speak to people for and against it, and they're both saying this is going to be good for democracy and good for the economy. I see both sides. I'm not going to get into it.
The only thing I would say is that it's not because not that there isn't important, you know, points on how this is going to affect the judiciary and democracy. There are, but the vast majority I see of the people I see protesting on the street, whether on the right or the left, they don't understand too much about the complexity.
Dude, they don't understand shit.
Yeah, generally speaking, like
nothing. I have a good friend who's out there protesting, and I asked, "What are you protesting?" He's like, "I want to support democracy," and I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Should we have? Do you think a big part of government should go unchecked?" No. Will that lead to corruption? Yes. What country has less checks and balances on the judiciary than Israel? Name one. We literally have no checks and balances. It's like there must be an amount of corruption there. Does the legislation go too far? Sure. But I don't explain to me this democracy thing. You know, I just didn't get it. And by the way, people on the that support the bill would also say that. And I think the bill goes too far. But here I am. I said I didn't want to talk about
it. I have plenty of opinions on the bill and what's going on the side. The only thing I want,
and I only read it in English, so I have a bias filter. We all have a bias filter, but it's important for my listeners to know that I'm only doing this by consuming English-speaking Israeli media. So obviously, I would have a better, wider. Wouldn't say it's better per se, but a wider perspective if I was consuming Hebrew media too. Yeah, you're saying.
And my feeling from the street, and that's like, you know, the Hebrew-speaking street, is that really this isn't about the judiciary system specifically.
Right. I never heard them talk about that, or checks and balances, or any of that.
It's an identity crisis that we have in the country, and that's like, what is the purpose of the state of Israel? What are the Jewish people doing here?
Is that
what kind of country do we want to be?
I agree that we have that. I don't think that's this. I think there's a power crisis. I think that the left has been losing power slowly over the course of the last few decades. And with the exception of the media, which is because of technology is going to slowly fall apart. Like you've kind of seen the left's power in the media, let's say in America, which I know very well. They see that this is an establishment that's unchecked and that's totally controlled and owned by the far left. And this is their kind of last way to hold power. I see it as a power thing. I do totally agree. We have an identity crisis. That goes back to my comment earlier about Jewishness versus Israeliness. Not that they're versus. I think they go together. But I think that there is a little bit of a tug of war in culture there.
And I think that the tug of war on culture is inherently connected to the identity, because in Hebrew media,
yes, I agree.
Bringing up in all contexts is how many Mizrachi judges are there? That's the thing they keep bringing up, and it's because it speaks to the fact that a large portion of the society, whether they're Mizrachi or Dati, religious, or Haredi, ultra Orthodox, they see themselves as not being represented by the liberal left elite of the country.
Well, they're not. But it's not just they're not. I mean, per my comment earlier, in their private lives, they're intentionally avoided. They're intentionally boxed out. Like this isn't it. I hate to talk about racism within Judaism. I'm biracial, but like that you see and you feel that. So like it is totally, it's there. My family, my father's side is from Yemen. This didn't happen to my family, but a lot of other Yemeni families, you had the white socialists in government taking their kids, separating them away from their parents, throw them in orphanage, trying to strip them of their Jewish identity, shave their peyote, their sideburns, and everything that, and try to make them Israeli and remove the Jewishness from it. That's from early stage white socialist, Israel. And I think you kind of get some of those feelings and vibes continue today amongst the established white socialist leaning left. And they still know that and they still feel that, and that hasn't changed. And when I speak to my neighbors, they talk about it too. I live in a largely Yemenite neighborhood. So they also talk about it, and you feel it, and it's tangible. For me, it's then like distant until I started speaking to Israelis. And then I understood this is like a real feeling, a real problem. And then I work a lot in tech. And a lot of people I work with in tech, they have no idea the way they're speaking comes off as extremely like, I wouldn't just say racist. I don't think that's his job. I think that's a cop out of properly explaining the thing. I think it's a very lazy way of trying to explain what's going on. That's why I don't really like the word. I think it's a shortcut and lazy way. You talked about earlier the nuance, and maybe we'll get into that now. But that these Israelis, they see that like that they look down on them. I'm starting to feel that, and I think it's in America too. It's not a race thing; it's becoming a class thing. What do you think?
Well, I think they're connected, right? Because a lot of what's happening right now isn't just a conversation about ethnicity, but how ethnicity overlaps with class, with the financial disparities in the country, as well as religion and the cultural inclinations of populations.
But I
And I
think it's
think
the culture will have to do with the class. So, like, you can be wealthy and even trust fund baby wealthy. But if you, let's say, like Mizrachi music, you like to ride ATVs and the so-called right, they're gonna hate you. Like I think it's they're like, oh, why aren't you, eat at our restaurants, drink our wine, you know what I mean, kind of thing.
right, but that's another way of saying like you can be Mizrahi, but as long as you act Ashkenazi, right? Like we say in Hebrew, we
Right.
say like in Hebrew, hu ishtaknez. He is making himself as if he is Ashkenazi, right? This is something that
Right.
people use colloquially to refer to somebody that's trying to move up in society socioeconomically by emulating a specific ethnic group.
Do you think that is harmful, that terminology?
I do, because like ultimately,
I do. It's like when people say like, "Don't be white" or "Don't in America,"
right,
like
and
don't
I
act
think that a
white.
lot of
And
what
I'm
we're
like, "What
doing,
is?" And it's what they connotate. It's not like one in general. I think that's racist against white people. And if anything, hurts black non-whites that would say that.
right.
But often they imply educated in a
Right. And
sense.
I think that we have to differentiate between things that are helpful for everybody, right? In the sense of like having a job, a stable job doesn't make you Ashkenazi. Just like in America, having a job shouldn't make you white. But this is something that Eurocentrism and wanting to have a monopoly on certain goods and lifestyles, it's what they wanted to impart to the rest of the society, that there's one way to be successful, there's one way to be cultured, right? And right now we're seeing there's a challenge, right? There's a challenge to this hegemony, the idea that Mizrachi music can be cultured music. It doesn't have to be Beethoven, it could be Zohar Goth. And that's just like a microcosm of the general discussion that's being had. That's saying like, okay, we want to have a society that's an accurate reflection of the Jewish experience, not just specifically the
Who's
Western or
we? I
European
don't
or
think that.
the
I think you're wrong, man. I think you want that. I think I want that. Everyone wants a society that reflects their Judaism.
Well, I would say that the people that are no, I would say the majority of Israelis do, right? Because the average Israeli, just in terms of like, just statistically, is either Mizrahi or mixed Ashkenazi and Mizrahi, likes Mizrahi music. That's why it's the pop music now. Feels very connected to their Judaism in the sense of like the national key components. Like when they asked Omar Adam, what's the most Jewish thing? And he said putting on tefillin, because it feels like it connects him to this peoplehood, right? So I would say that the average Israeli wants that. And what we're seeing in terms of the political moment is saying, okay, who is going to represent that for us in the Knesset? And Netanyahu, just to like a little bit of political commentary, that's how he created this kind of hodgepodge coalition, because he himself is an Ashkenazi secular,
Extremely
libertarian
impressive that he
minded
created
person.
it and maintained it so long. That's
Exactly. And then
that's
and they bring
very
in
impressive.
Haredim. So
Right.
where Ashkenazi Haredim. So he
Right.
realized that there's these components of society that are kind of motivated by the rejection of the Mapai, the far left Israeli
This socialist.
model, and which was socialist, and trying to offer something different. But what the problem is that the alternative isn't clear, and because the alternative isn't clear, a lot of
That
the
is
people are getting
true.
caught up in all of this kind of Israeli version of identity politics and squabbles about the structure of the country. But all these things, are just symptoms of, okay, we need to decide who we are. What are we doing here? Right. The reason why we can't create a constitution is we can't have a consensus about this clear message. What are we doing?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we're ever going to have a constitution, and neither does England, and they're okay, I guess. We're not the only democracy without a constitution. You said something interesting there. So the like what unites them is anti-Mapai, anti, let's say, elitist socialist, so to speak. The snobby part of Israeli culture, unfortunately. Um, do you think more unites? Like one, unfortunately, political is a game of opposition. Don't vote for him, right? Fear is the ultimate motivator. That guy's going to do X, Y, and Z or ruin, ABC, whatever, and therefore vote for me. I'll stop him. I'll protect you against her, whatever. You don't think that there are things that do unite them? I do think what goes back to earlier we were saying is that what do unite the opposition is, or the opposition, those that oppose the Mapai, is more of a stronger Jewish identity, and Mapai wants to destroy that Jewish identity. Whether it's Omer Adam, who's not religious, but he says the most Jewish thing is putting on tefillin, or people say the Maccabees of today would be settlers, or by the way, which has been polled. Like people say, who would you call the Maccabees of today? People say the settlers, or people then these are all these different things that people are saying, or like or Haredim or whatever. So I do think that there is a common denominator. It's not just opposition of. But I think what they're opposed to is the fact is we're really tearing up these people up, and it's fun. It's just interesting to me. It's like, is that let's say the former Mapai or the Laborites or those that, let's say, look down on other groups that aren't like them, that they are the establishment, and they're saying, in a sense, my quote unquote group or class largely founded and largely built this country. And therefore, I don't want to give power to those up and coming. I don't want to give power to the downtrodden that I may have even downtrodden, right? I don't want to, because I see that a threat, or maybe even that maybe they'll do to me what I've done to them for the last few generations. Do you think that's legitimate? Do you think that's? I'm just throwing shit out there. I'm throwing hypotheticals or thoughts, ideas. I want to get your opinion.
Well, I think that we're describing this current political moment. A lot of that is this kind of knee jerk, like, oh, I need to protect what we've accomplished. I need to protect what's ours. The kind of the classic group mine versus yours. But I do think it's important to acknowledge, right, that a lot of what is the binding ethos of Israeli society, the military service, the success of the IDF, the success of the political structure, despite all of its flaws, the creation of an Israeliness is very much, it's hard to take that credit away from Ben Gurion's Mapai.
No, and nor should you. Right. I just want to be very clear.
Yeah,
I'm not a revisionist. I mean,
sure.
We get all the credit and all of that, but like you said, like where Judaism is going to be as a governing because of who we are in 50 years is going to be dramatically different from today. And today is dramatically different than what it was 50 years ago. People need to embrace and adopt to change and grow a bigger tent. I saw on Twitter 2 weeks ago this big secular Zionist, and she was like, Zionism is solely secular and da, right? And then I was like, so much for diversity and inclusion, right? Is what I'm thinking. And it's this kind of like, no, we are the Zion. And I was like, Zionist is a big tent, guys, and there aren't a lot of us. So maybe we should work together, because we're sharing a future together, whether we like it or not. Like, hey, you and I can disagree on whatever the hell, right? But our kids might get married. So I go to the same school and have the same friends and serve next to each other in the army. And I was like, all of this is bullshit. Like, it's all rubbish in a sense. I'm getting like a lot of vibes of that, but I feel every group, and I would say they just want to hold on what they have, right? In a sense, they're all the traditional conservative. They want to hold on to their power, and maybe can I expand it, so to speak. That can be the Haredim, that can be like, don't uproot any more settlements, at least keep the status quo, at least keep the status quo with the quotel, keep the status quo with the judicial system, keep the status quo. You see it from everyone, right? And no one's willing to like, hey, let's talk about the judiciary openly. Like, what would a good judicial system look like? Why don't you point to the 3 countries you think do it the best and why? And I'm on the other side, and I'll point to the 3 best and why. And let's see those overlaps, and maybe then we can do that. And let's write a fresh piece of law that would do that. As an example, I think it's too late now to do that. I think the politicians who have politicized it. But you can do that for a million things where there's disagreement, is that people are like, hey, you know, we can do win-win. I mean, 80% of the Jewish people agree on 80% of policy. But I believe the media wants to emphasize the 20%. I mean, like, as you saw my conversation with Hallel Silverman, is that it was like, I asked her, how much damage does the media do? And in a sense, to her supporters, the media emphasizes it gives her views, it gives her clicks, it gives her awareness. On the other hand, I bet if there wasn't a camera there, and if the women of the wall went and did their thing for 20 minutes once a month, no one would, and if there was no media coverage, it would be fine. And no one would do or say anything. And they'd be accepted. And people that disagree have been like, yeah, they do their thing. They just come once a month or whatever, you know, let them do their thing. It's not a lachli asar. It goes against what we're thinking and their culture and blah, blah, blah. And people would just move on. But I feel like the media wants to, hey, here's a scab. Let's pick at it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
where's the media saying, hey, come do your bat mitzvah at the southern part of the Kotel, even though it's not like the main plaza part, just to encourage it? No, let's find the most controversial hate thing. You know, let's find the one maniac at the Kotel who spit on someone, and let's make that front news for 5 days. You know what I mean? Or that woman that dressed naked to the Kotel in underwear 2 weeks ago. Like, you know what I mean? As opposed to literally the millions of other people that come totally respectful and talk about how great it is. And let's say, why don't we do like multi-religious prayers together at the Kotel? Like, obviously, so do you think that, like, how much is the media dividing us? Is it possible by nature for, you know, as they said, you know, if it bleeds, it leads. By nature, can the media play a positive role? And then I want to know the work that you're doing as a digital educator. In a sense, you are the media. In a sense, this is media. What role do we play? And how can we bring people that are very much stuck in their bubbles and don't speak to people differently than them, be able to just have these conversations? Because it's not just people that youth might think look different, act different. He's Haredi, he's a settler, he's totally secular. This person's an atheist or agnostic, blah, blah, blah. But like, you can have people that have equally secular, go to the same school, live in the same neighborhood, but this person's left wing on the judiciary, this is the right wing on the judiciary, and they won't even exchange opinions or ideas, right? Like, they won't even talk about it or talk to each other. How do we break that barrier?
Well, first, it's important for us to recognize that this tendency to tribalism has been the bane of Jewish existence from the beginning.
It's human nature too. I wouldn't just say it's a Jewish thing. It's human nature.
For sure. And I'd say if we're just talking about like zooming into Jewish history, it's been the downfall of the previous two iterations of Jewish autonomy in the land of Israel. And it's what we're facing right now in the third generation of the existence of this independent Jewish state. And recognizing that, we can see how the mass media today feeds into this narrative of drawing lines in the sand and trying to polarize people into their tribal camps, so to speak. And it's our role, who are also engaged in media, if maybe not mass media, but our own, media production, whether it's on the individual level or on the local organizational level, to highlight stories that are interesting while not polarizing, right? Because it's easy to focus on the points in which Ben Gurion, for example, first prime minister of Israel, disagreed with the ideological beliefs of Rav Ovadia Yosef, the former Sephardic chief rabbi. I'd rather explore where they agreed and how certain groups in Israeli society are drawing off of both of their legacies, right? That's an interesting story, right? And where we can identify those things in specific individuals and movements, people will be intrigued. But instead of covering those stories, some people and some groups decide to hyper-focus on the things that divide. Right. And I think that that's the mistake of the mass media, and that's the mistake of some key individuals. And what we need to be doing as responsible people that want to envision a future in which Israel is a comfortable, safe place where people can feel that they are aspiring for something better, whether or not they're secular or religious, Ashkenazi or Mizrachi, Haredi or Reform. Right. And we can do that, but we need to start thinking more in the mode of what unites the various tribes as opposed to what divides us.
Yeah, that's a good point. Do you think if you know two people who strongly disagree on something, how can you bring in your personal life? I'm speaking to those that are watching, that they're like, how do I bring two people that radically disagree and that would never meet each other? How can I bring them together to have a conversation so they can both grow and we can all, and it would serve all society, not to mention the two individuals and their families?
So first thing is when we're just dealing with each other as members of ideological camps, it's very easy to dehumanize that person or just to focus on the words and the ideas. But we have to recognize that behind every ideology, behind every idea, there's a human being, right? And there's something that that person experienced, which created a psychological opening for them to create or to accept that idea. So let's take an idea that you are so vehemently reject. If you speak to that person as a human being and understand what they've experienced and their traumas and their victories and everything, it's going to be very clear to you why that person accepted that idea. And at that point, it's very hard for you to demonize that person. You might disagree with that person, right? You might vehemently reject that idea, right? But you're not going to demonize that person because you understand that if you had gone through a different set of circumstances, who knows whether or not you would have been likely to accept that idea and adopt it as your own. And so generally, when I bring people together, I'll just take a very clear example, right? Jews and Arabs that live in Judea and Samaria, right? And also known as the West Bank. If you take those two populations with very different aspirations, with very different worldviews, but you walk them down the process of their life and what things that they've been through, you'll see that after they speak to each other as human beings, then the discussion on ideology, on politics, on religion is a lot more meaningful and a lot more useful.
Yeah, I bet those two groups get along better than the white Zion. I shouldn't say white per se, but let's say the elitist Zionists in Ramat Aviv.
Yeah,
They work together. They work together. They raise together. They know the land together. They have a lot more in common together, and I think there's far more mutual respect, I would say, than that. And that's why I wonder how much of it is a clash thing, in a sense, because that was my experience. A friend of mine once said, I wouldn't say it's a friend. Someone I was friendly with that he was much older. He was, I don't know, he was in his 50s. Is that much older? Not really. So he was Gush Katif, and he said, we would go to Gaza, which is now by Hamas, and we would get our car mechanics fixed by those Arabs. And they would be our contractors. And they would babysit our kids. And anything you would outsource would be cheaper. We'd bring them. And they'd work in our flower. And in our flowers are greenhouses that we grow and everything. And they destroyed peace by people that are far away in Tel Aviv that don't know me or peace, don't know my Arab friends and neighbors and my coworkers in Gaza. And they've literally created us as enemies and war because they actually tore us apart. Literally, like this, literally pulled us away from working together, from doing the peace work on the ground that they claim to be for. And now look, we all have more war and death, and it was just, that's one of those things that totally stuck with me, that it was like a lot of these people that talk a lot about peace, peace, they have the greatest fear of the other, right? They want, let's say, a divorce of the Arab residents in the land of Israel, in a sense, because they fear them and they hate them. Same as people there's some people on the very far, like radically anti-Haredi, don't want them in the army because they fear them and they hate them. And they're doing it in the sense that I'm pro-peace, but I feel that they're saying, but in the end, it comes from a place of fear of the unknown and hatred of both, let's say, settlers and Arabs. And ironically, the real peace happens on the ground, right? Like the day-to-day citizens. No real peace deal will ever be made with some government. In my opinion, PLO and Pew Research, 99% of Arabs in Judea and Samaria have a negative opinion of Jews. I mean, look at their textbooks. But that's the reason why, I don't want to shift too much here, but that's the reason why we won't with them. And then our peace with Jordan and Egypt only works because they're not democracies, because we get along better with the leadership than we do their citizens. And then you have things, interestingly, like the UAE and Bahrain, where the people themselves are not anti-Semitic at all. It was the governments in a sense. And then the governments came around. If you think about it, I brought this up before. I'm totally getting off topic, but I can tie it all together, and you probably will see where I'm going with this. 2.5 years ago, it was not comfortable. It was not safe for me as a Jew to wear a yarmulke in London, in Paris, etc., in Germany. I could go there. The UAE and Bahrain didn't recognize my existence. I was less than rats. Now I'm safe for wearing a kippah, a yarmulke, in Bahrain and UAE that didn't even recognize me, my existence as a human, let alone a Jew or anything. Wouldn't let me in their country. I am safer there than I am in Western Europe with the yarmulke. And I think there's a larger story here about anti-Semitism that we need to unpack and figure out. Is that the closer we are working together, let's say with Arabs in a sense, or the other, it could also be within Jews, right? The more we're able to build bridges, and the more we're able, I think, to find peace, real in the day-to-day peace. Who cares about this national peace, right? And I think that is far more important. And because we're seeing that now with the UAE, and I have a friend that's there, religious with tzitzit wearing out, walking around Dubai with his wife, who she wears mitpachat, and as visibly Jewish as one can be, and having a great time. And he sent me some photos. On the other hand, he can't go do that in London or parts of France or Paris, really, right? Like safely, joyously, be welcomed in Brussels. And so, there's something there. And I don't understand it. It reminds me also, I'll give another parallel. The illegal immigrants from Africa that are largely living in South Tel Aviv, they that are not Jewish. A lot of people that are advocating, and I'm of course I understand that the irony here is that I'm speaking in generalities and groups. I understand the irony of that, but a lot of people that want them to stay want nothing to do with them. In a sense, that you see how they look and speak to them. Or I remember someone showed me a video on YouTube that someone that wanted to help find them relocate into Africa in a safe way, an economical way that's better for their lives, sent free tickets, bus tickets, and paid for their entry into like a high-end country club, like a swimming pool for the Africans, and to let them enjoy the day. And they set up video cameras. This is the same generic population that wants them to stay. And you just see the racism of how they despise these Black individuals, right? And that came here just looking for a better economic life or as refugees. And they talk a good game, but then when it comes to their real experiences, whether it's them, settlers, Haredim, Arabs, they treat them differently. And that, I don't know, it's like from the high horse from up here, I want that peace. But the real peace is done on the ground. I don't know if you're following where I'm going with this.
I definitely hear the last point, in that I think ultimately it's about practicing what we preach. And I think this applies to the left and it applies to the right, and I think everybody that occupies the ideological center, like myself, I think that it's very important for us to, if we care about the rights of African asylum seekers or economic refugees or migrants, then you need to practice what you preach. You need to be there with those people to hear their stories and to support them here. And likewise, the Palestinians, if you want to see Palestinians be successful, be free, be equal and autonomous, like I do, then you have to practice what you preach. You can't do that from
why don't they? Why don't they? Why are those, let's say, as an example, why don't they? But what isn't it? Is it easier to, and just it's more comfortable? Is it, as my friend would say, white people that yell the most against anti-racism, speaking about Americans, right? But just to be clear, tend to treat people of a different race worse than most people that don't. Men that speak the most about feminism tend to be the more likely to, generally speaking, abuse or mistreat women. There's this kind of weird dilemma, like a projection in a sense. I want peace, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to speak to someone different than me. So I'll just talk about it, but not do anything about it. Why aren't we doing anything? Like,
Well, I
why
don't know if
aren't we
it's true
anything?
that,
And
yeah.
go ahead. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't know if that's true that people that
Okay,
that
go ahead.
talk about racism or talk about sexism or Palestinian rights are less involved, or sorry, are more involved in anti-Palestinian, rhetoric or anti.
No. Right. Sorry, I want to be very clear. I'm differentiating between the American West and the Israeli, but I find that those that are often the ones to speak the most about peace are the least likely to actually go and extend an olive branch and, let's say, have them over for Shabbat dinner, or go and pursue intimate relationships and friendships with people that, let's say, that are Arabs, as an example. And I would say the same thing. Yeah. So that's my experience. And I saw that kind of crossover, and maybe I made too much of a stretch because that's more of an American issue in particular. So if we were to bring it back, let's say, to actual, let's say, a peace among Am Yisrael and us getting along. And so if you have two people that, like, so it's interesting, you call yourself like the center. It's like, I very much associate with the left and I very much associate with the right. Yeah, I find myself to be the whole spectrum in a sense, and political homeless. The question is, like, how do you bring, so I'm very much involved in a lot of different groups, including everyone I mentioned. And so I don't know where that bridging comes in when most of the information that we consume, people different from us, is through our screen that is feeding us more and more hatred and fear. And that's why I really want to unpack with you in the next few minutes before we end, is because of your experience as a digital educator. How can you break an algorithm? Can we bring people with opposite? Is it possible to bring people that are of the left and of the right together, that are secular and very religious? The pro-Palestinian state, and, let's say, settlers that strongly oppose it. Is it possible to bring them together and have a conversation? Or do you think that, like, no one really wants to, and it's possible that we, as for human nature, we don't want to see something that we potentially disagree with. We're scared to change our mind. We're scared of our opinions to be challenged. We're scared to know that everything I've been yelling, and that almost my opinions is basically a part of my identity, that I'm going to challenge them and shake them. Is there work that what's the work that we can do? Like, how can we actually solve this now that we've been bitching about it for the last hour?
So I'll use an example that you referenced in your question, and that's the idea of an algorithm, right? So let's say somebody is going on, scrolling on Instagram, and the algorithm has identified this person really likes people that call out hypocrisy, speak in a tone that's like, you said this, but what you really meant was this, and showing them out, right? And breaking that down. So what you can do in order to get some nuance to enter that person's feed is you start off your message in that same tone that person's used to seeing videos. But then after that, you bridge it into the full picture. For example, recently I created a video where I called out AOC, right, who's very well known for espousing progressive politics and often flirting with anti-Zionist anti-Semitism. But in that video, she was calling out the hypocrisy of the Republican Party that allows, some Republican congressmen who have said anti-Semitic things to continue to have positions within the party. And so I started the video by calling her out. But in the same vein, I also held the Republicans accountable for things that they've done as well. And so in the way somebody, whether they're seeing that video, it's coming across their feed because the algorithm said they would like it from the right or from the left, all of a sudden, whether they like it or not, they've been exposed to a little bit more information.
Does the algorithm pick up your tone?
The algorithm absolutely picks up the tone. It picks up the key words that you use, the way that
I know it picks up your words. I didn't know if it could pick up tone or speed of language.
Well, I'll tell you how it works. Like, for example, if a certain tone registers with me, I'm going to spend more time looking at that video, right? And so then it'll notice, just by virtue of how much time I'm spending looking at a video, that
no, I understand that, but it knows, like, okay, You know, it knows like, okay, Yirmiyahu likes this person. He likes this kind of content. He likes this. He likes that. But also, like, he also likes when someone has this tone.
Well,
Like,
it'll
they're
know
also
by
including that.
it'll identify it by virtue of me spending a lot of time looking at it.
Right. Okay. Fine. Okay,
Yeah.
but not specifically. Yeah. Go on. I just wanted to get that clarity. Okay. Okay. So you're saying that I get it, but see, you can hack algorithms or things like that, or maybe you can give counter examples and comments in social media, but that's not really gonna change anything. That's just gonna say, okay, this man sees both sides. This man plays both sides. This man prioritizes his anti-Semitism over left and right politics or whatever, right? Um, but how do we get the ideas to know, like, earlier on, you talked about the fear of Jews, Judeophobia, is that there is phobia of other. Facebook is a lot that the thing that responds the most, the engagement is fear, right? Or anger, or the anger emoji, the anger reaction on Facebook is often the strongest in the sense, other than the regular like. It's people use that, it really gets them more likely to engage and whatnot. And how do we break that down? I just don't know how to, like, if I were to say speak to someone that's very like anti-secular, okay, let's say a Haredi that like is not open-minded, or I shouldn't say open, I shouldn't say that, but very grew up or whatever it is, you can empathize and understand, and including personal experiences, national experience. They despise secular people. Therefore, they take everything that's secular about that person and secular people, and they dismiss all of it. How do you get someone like that to speak to a secular person? Understand where they're coming from, understand their experience, understand their values. How do you get them to have a conversation, and vice versa, right? You get the secular to do it, to sit with him. Um, how do you get that? How do you get a person to do that? Because as soon as you say you should talk, like, they're already like, oh, or in America, that person's like Stalin, that person's like Mao, that person's like Hitler, whatever, God forbid. And that we easily label and compartmentalize, so we protect ourselves from hearing opinions that are different from ours.
So I would say, first of all, the breaking the algorithm is important in the sense that it exposes people to information that they otherwise wouldn't be exposed to. A lot of what is so polarizing about our world today, what allows us to compartmentalize people so easily, and therefore, and as a result, become afraid of them, is the fact that we're not exposed to other people's experiences. We're not exposed to the same facts that everybody thinks that everybody's exposed to, right? A lot of people, because they get caught up in this connected nodes, in this network of people that think and experience life the same way, they're not exposed to other information. As a result, they assume that everybody knows this, and the only way that they could disagree with me is because they're a bad faith actor. And so the first thing is to be able to break this kind of closed network and expose people to information and a set of facts and experiences that they're not familiar with. And you can do that also on an interpersonal level. If I'm like use the example you said, if I'm speaking to somebody who is an extreme or a closed-minded member of the Haredi community that doesn't have any interaction with secular people, then how do you blame that person from having skewed stereotypes about secular Jews, right? Because it's easy to be afraid of someone or something or some phenomenon if you're not familiar with it. And so if that person's not willing to speak with a secular person, then the people, like, I bet you're describing yourself as somebody that sees, good in the right, sees good in the left, sees good in the religious and good in the secular, then our job is to embody the narratives and the subjective experiences of these individuals and sectors, and to basically be the bridge between the two. Because if you understand, you might disagree with the secular world, but you understand where they're coming from, then your responsibility then is to relay that message and to embody that empathetically to somebody from a community that hasn't had any exposure to that worldview before.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, terrific. Last thing, if someone wants to get involved and be able to do more to fight anti-Semitism stereotypes and bring people together online and kind of thing, if people want to, they don't know where to start, and they're like, what's the easiest way for them to start?
The easiest way to start in our day and age is definitely on social media, because there, basically, you could go out in the street and speak to a couple different people and change their perspective on a certain issue. But on social media, you have the ability to reach, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions. And so, if you're not a content creator or a digital educator, then just going into the comment section and you're seeing what the most popular comment is and responding, somebody might read your comment. But in order for you to be able to do that and do it effectively, you need to be informed. So if people really care about these subjects, about Jewish identity, about the history of Israel, about Zionism, about conservatism or liberalism or secularism or religiosity, you need to study those things. You need to be informed. And once you are informed with a diversity of perspectives, things that challenge the very core of what you think and what you believe, then you're going to be able to have an informed opinion, and then you can take that to social media.
If someone wants to read a diverse views of opinions regarding Judaism or whatnot, and Zionism, the diversity of it, and I don't mean racial diversity, that doesn't interest me. Ideological, maybe religious diversity and political diversity. What is the easiest way to do that? Because obviously, social media won't feed you that. It's just going to give you more shit, and next thing you know, you're going to be boxed into one way of thinking, and unfortunately, that happens to anyone. How does one do that?
Look, aside from following, That Semite and Unpacked and stuff like that, where we do focus on giving, a diversity of perspectives and the nuance when it comes to Jewish identity and ideologies and Zionism and Israeli politics and society, you got to go to books, right? Because books that's where you can get a perspective, and then you compare it to other thinkers. Let's just take, for example, Zionism. Read, in addition to reading Herzl, read Jabotinsky. Right, so that way you get the labor and the revisionist Zionism. Read the writings of Rav Kook, the first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of the land of Israel, and then read Berl Katzenelson, right, where you get both perspectives on the secular approach to Zionism versus the religious approach to Zionism, and then you can have that's just one example, right? Specifically with Zionism, that's how you can get a really informed opinion on the subject.
Yeah, my dream is to start like a charter high school and be able to do all that and teach people financial independence. So no one learns about personal finance. Okay, so let's bring it back to you. We can follow you to learn more. This is a great way to land. Where can people follow you? Yirmiyahu?
So at @that_Semite on Instagram and TikTok, and you can find me in a number of my longer form videos on Unpacked on YouTube.
Unpacked on YouTube. Are you on Twitter?
No Twitter.
Is that intentional or just
that is intentional? That is intentional. I find that the best spaces for me to educate and to teach, and to stay out of the kind of more back and forth fighting with people is by removing myself from Twitter and staying on Instagram and on TikTok.
Yeah, it sounds like you're mentally healthy, Yirmiyahu. Maybe
I aim to be. I hope that we all do.
Thank you so much for joining us. Go check out that _Semite and Jewish Unpacked or just Unpacked on YouTube, right? And we'll put all the socials down in the description. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you again.